Hello and welcome to the Tough Girl Podcast Extra. I'm your host, Sarah Williams. If you are new to the Tough Girl Podcast, then I'm so delighted that you've chosen to listen to this episode. A little bit more about me. I started the Tough Girl Podcast 4 years ago. It's all about motivating and inspiring women and girls. It's about increasing the amount of female role models in the media. I not only talk the talk, but also walk the walk. So I've did a whole variety of different challenges, from running the Marathon des Sables in 2016 to through hiking the Appalachian Trail in 2017, and most recently cycling from cycling from Vancouver in Canada all the way down to Cabo San Lucas in Mexico. Tough Girl Extra is an added bonus episode. So every once in a while, we go back and speak with a previous guest who's been on the podcast to catch up with them, to see what they've been up to since we last spoke. The reason that the Tough Girl Podcast comes out on a regular basis, the reason I'm able to produce this incredible content, is due to the support of patrons. So the Tough Girl Podcast and Tough Girl Podcast Extra is sponsorship and ad free. There's going to be no interruptions as soon as we start. You just get straight into listening. And I can do this because of the financial support of patrons who every single month are donating between $2 and $25. So I could not do this without them. And I really do appreciate every single one of you. Thank you so much for stepping up, for taking action, and for donating. More information can be found at Patreon, patreon.com/Tough Girl Podcast. So please do go check it out. Please do take, a few moments and sign up, especially if you've been listening every single week and you're getting a huge amount of benefit from it. Take the action, support the podcast, help me to put more episodes out like this. Enjoy. Tribe, I'm absolutely delighted that we are back speaking with Bex Band, the ordinary adventurer who we previously spoke with. I couldn't believe this when I looked. Back in May 2017. Back then, Bex shared more about her amazing walk, 1,000 kilometers across Israel, as well as being the first person to kick scoot 240 kilometers of the London Loop Trail. Since then, Bex has gone on to do incredible things, but I'll let Bex share a little bit more about that. Hi, Bex. How you doing?
Hey, I'm good, thank you.
So where are you currently based at the moment? Because I know you're a bit of a nomad and you do a lot of traveling. So where are you currently?
So I've been nomadic now for almost 3 years, but last week I moved to Bristol. So I'm just renting a place in Bristol, and it feels amazing to be staying still for a little bit. And after 3 years on the road, I'm really excited just to have a bit of normality again.
Oh my God, absolutely 100%. So we'll definitely be coming to talk to you a little bit more about that, why you made the changes and why you decided on Bristol. But let's just go back and talk about what you've been doing since. So there's almost two areas that we're going to be discussing. You've got Love Her Wild, which I'll get you to explain in a little bit, and then also you and your personal challenges. You've been on quite a few adventures since we last spoke. I mean, one of the big ones was kicking the States. Is that right?
Yeah, that's it.
Let's start with that one, because that is fantastic. Tell me a little bit more about Kicking the States.
So myself and my husband kick scooted 1,000. Yeah. So imagine what the kids are on, like the little scooters. But we had adult versions, and we kick scooted the entire length of America. So 1,750 miles in total. How
did that come about? Where did the idea come from?
Do you know what? I'd put a few personal adventures on hold because I was so focused on Love Her Wild, but I just knew I wanted to do something really big that had never been done before. And, I'm not really very skilled, I'm not like a skilled mountaineering, or I'm not really a cycle tourer or anything like that. So I was kind of trying to think of something that would be fun and kind of big and new. And honestly, I don't even know where this idea came from, but it just came to me one night that this would be a fantastic thing to do. And it was really fun. It definitely wasn't without its challenges. Kick scooting is a lot harder than cycling, but it was just incredible. And what I really liked about doing it on the scooters was, when we would stop in places, everyone would ask us about it and would want to have a go on the scooters themselves. So it was really amazing for kind of just getting chatting to people along the way. And a big drive for that was fundraising for charity. So on my travels, I'd stopped in Tanzania and absolutely fallen in love with this school in rural Tanzania, and could see that they really needed money and wanted to use this expedition to raise funds for them. them. So that was another big drive for the trip.
Did you have much time to prepare before you headed off in May to do the challenge?
We kind of decided to do it just a few months before we actually left. And it was enough time that, that was a very different type of expedition to the one I've done before. So that one was sponsored, and there was a lot more social media involved because I had like a following, which I didn't have on my previous expeditions, and obviously the fundraising as well. But actually, in terms of organizing the expedition like day to day and working out how much, where we'd be staying each night, how much distance to do each day, just kind of worked that out as we went along.
I mean, there's a couple of interesting things in there that you've talked about. It's one, it's having a following now and having to share that on social media, because I think people assume it's really easy to do, which it's not. And then the charity fundraising, so raising money for charity, and also it being sponsored. So let's just work through each of them. So you've built this following now, which is absolutely fantastic. How did you find this in comparison with other journeys, having to share more of the journey, more of yourself on social media? Did you feel as though it added to what you were doing, or did you feel it took away from the actual journey? And how did you manage to balance the sharing?
Yeah, it's really difficult. And I definitely felt the pressure sometimes that I got to keep on top of blogging and posting and things like that. But I absolutely love sharing like the journey. And for me, it like really adds to the expedition, and whatever I'm doing is being able to share it with others. And I think there's kind of like this negative image in the adventure world that, being on social media is a really bad thing and it takes away from your expedition. And it kind of annoys me a little bit, actually, because without that sharing, without like my followers, there's no way I could do what I do now. And I just think that's a really amazing, positive thing. So sure, there were some nights I was exhausted and the last thing I wanted to do was write a blog. But in the bigger picture, I think, I really took things away from that. Like having people supporting me all the way was amazing. Like on the tough days, or if I posted an Instagram stories where I was like, really mad or really upset, the people that were following me would write really nice messages, and that kind of real time support is an amazing thing.
Yeah. I also find as well that I'm almost hyper aware of my surroundings and what I'm seeing, because I'm either constantly looking like, what's beautiful, what would make a great photo, what should I film, where am I going through? So instead of just sort of blindly scooting past or cycling past, I'm actually very conscious of my environment, and even more so just to make sure that I do get the shots and follow along, which is fantastic. Now, this was a sponsored trip, which is absolutely amazing, because sponsorship, I think, is one of those things that a lot of women that I've spoken to have found it incredibly difficult to find to get sponsorship for their trips and adventures. So tell us just a little bit more about your sponsorship, how it came about, and then maybe let's talk about some advice and tips and about how other women can get sponsorship.
Sure. So I decided I wanted to do this trip as a sponsored expedition, and kind of just looked at what I could offer a brand. And so I was sponsored by a brilliant brand called Vivo Life, and they're very in tune in terms of ethos and what I believe in. They offer like vegan health shakes, but they're very environmental conscious and they're very charitable. So there was a real fit in what we were doing on the kick scooting and what our message was and what their message was. So I spoke to a few people before to ask for advice on how to go about sponsorship, and really thought I would have, it's a really difficult task ahead of me. But actually, it was really easy. And I don't say that to be like, really arrogant or showy offy, but I just think if it's right and if it's meant to be, then it should be fairly easy. And I think it was just a really good point where I had grown that following and I did have something that I could offer a brand, and the expedition was right for both sides. And I think, I literally think I sent like 5 emails out, and it was the first call I made, and it, it happened.
To be fair, like when things are in alignment, when you've got the same values and everything links in, that is how it should be, being able to give something back to the brand as well. The charity fundraising was obviously, was a big part of the reason for doing Kicking the States and raising money for the school over in Tanzania. Tell us more about the fundraising aspect, the talks that you did, and how that either added to your trip or took away from your trip.
So fundraising is incredibly difficult, and it definitely comes with pressures. But actually, the pressure was entirely from myself that I put on myself. That I set this target that we wanted to raise $10,000 by the end of the trip, and yeah, it was hard, and it was such an ongoing thing, like constantly thinking about speaking to everyone we pass. Maybe someone's going to donate. How do we keep plugging, keep mentioning the charity? But like the one thing I've taken away from the last few years of traveling is just how lucky I am with what I get to do and how privileged we all are to get a free education and free healthcare and things like that. So for me, doing the fundraising, it was like, honestly, if you ask me what's my single most proudest thing I've ever done, it is just raising that money, because I know how much of a difference it would make. And I actually think for the expedition, it definitely enhanced our experience, because people wanted to take us in because we were doing something good and because we were trying to be charitable and not just making it about ourselves. So we got hosted almost every night. And apart from like this big stretch right in the middle of California when we're going through the redwood trees, and we were camping most nights then, I thought we would be camping almost every night. But the reality was people were just so happy to take us in when they heard what we were doing. And again, like, the talks, we were doing fundraising talks along the way, and we made it onto TV and really fun things like that, that I think was because of the charity. And people want to help people who are helping people. I always say that, and I think it's true.
Did you raise the $10,000?
Yes, just. It was so satisfying passing that mark, because I'd just been thinking about it every day for 3 months, even more than finishing the actual expedition, like the end line. I was thinking more about that target of the fundraising, yeah. But that felt amazing. No,
congratulations. That's absolutely awesome. Like it's so difficult. I mean, when I ran London Marathon every year, I was fundraising, and it was just getting harder and harder and harder. And I was just like asking the same people over and over again.
I feel you.
Do you think you still, if you hadn't have raised the money, and you were short, do you think you would have still viewed the expedition as a success?
Oh, probably not, just because I wanted to reach that money so bad. But actually, I decided that if we hadn't reached the $10,000, I would just go get a job and top it up until we passed that mark. So for me, that was a real measure of success on the expedition.
Thinking about the expedition, the challenge, what were some of the hardest moments for you, or the moments that stand out as particularly challenging?
Oh, it's really hard to pick just one. I think looking at the whole picture, oh man, it was so tiring every day. Just speaking, I think like every day would speak to at least 30, 40 people. And then of course, everyone is like, why are you on scooters? And then we explain, and then it would be like, what the hell? And then it would just be question after question after question. Like, do you only kick with one leg? Everyone asks that. And just trying to be positive and be nice to everyone, even when you're tired and hot and hungry. But, everyone's potentially going to donate, and you just want to share the story and the excitement. So I found that really exhausting, and also being hosted every night can be really tiring. And we had, like California was hot, like insanely hot. And I'm not really a super athletic person, so definitely the physical side of the challenge was tough as well. And just the repetitiveness of getting up every single day and doing this long scoot.
Yeah. I mean, one of the things I've got written down in my notes, I've actually got legs circled, because I do want to I want to always ask. I don't want to ask. Yeah. But
the first thing they would ask is, are they motorized? And then when we said no, they're not, then they would go, do you scoot with one leg? And then it became like a running joke that we would be like, no, we scoot with both legs. And then one of us would make a joke that if we did scoot with just one leg, we would have one massive leg and we'll be walking like John Wayne. And we just said the same joke. We must have said it like 10,000 times on that trip.
But I was going to say, it is. Did you have a preferred leg though?
Yeah, so I can still see. If I go for a run and I look down at my legs, I got like this weird. I call it my scooter muscle because it's quite a special place on my leg, and it's definitely more bulgy on my right leg than my left.
I've cycled, the same route, and and done it, sat down on a bike pedaling, and I actually can't imagine standing up and doing. It's like a lunge movement, isn't it? Over and like it's a slight bend in the leg, and it's pushing away. Yeah, like how did you have to build up to like the distances that you were doing on your trip, or did you need to start out from the get go? Because I assume that you had a visa deadline. So, did you have a 6-month visa or a 3-month visa?
3-month visa, and honestly, I didn't know if it would be possible. Apart from scooting, I literally was on the scooter for 30 seconds before we boxed them up and took them to Canada where we started. And so I had no idea if how far we could scoot each day, if the scooters would do all right, if I would do all right. So there was a lot of unknown in that, but I just kind of tried to go with it and not stress about that too much. But honestly, it's just not as bad as I thought it would be. Like, really, if I can do it, anyone can do it, because I did no training. I wasn't in like a really fit state. And it was tough, but definitely doable. But that's being on your feet all day. That's where it's different from being on a bike, because I was quite jealous of the cyclists sometimes just because you get a seat.
Yeah. Get to sit down and sort of relax and just glide, especially like on the downhills. Taking you back to the start, what were your feelings at the very start?
Oh, I was so nervous. I remember that we stayed with this lovely, lovely family in Vancouver. And they put us up at the beginning and then again at the end before we flew home. And it was so comfortable there, and I just didn't want to start, but we just kind of headed off. It was just really surreal and strange, but I was mostly nervous, I think, about the accommodation, like not knowing where we were going to sleep each night. And, they're not very tolerant of wild campers, and I didn't really understand the rules, but there's signs everywhere in America saying like no trespassing and things like that. So it was just that horrible feeling of not knowing where you're going to sleep that night, and that real like uncertainty.
Yeah. How did you handle that?
So you just get used to it. Like, I just try and ignore it whenever I have nerves or negativity. I just kind of just try to accept it and not try to fight it. Like, a lot of people talk about being positive, and it just doesn't work for me, because actually what I try to do is be really positive, and then I get angry or frustrated that I'm not positive and I'm still in a negative mind frame. So I just kind of embrace it, and I just like think it's okay to be nervous. It's okay to be angry or whatever negative, whatever feeling I've got at that point. And, the more I do, that pushes me out of my comfort zone, both like expedition and adventure, but also in my work life as well. The more I do, the easier it gets to just be comfortable with being uncomfortable.
On this expedition, you were actually doing it with your husband, Gil, which is fantastic. But how does it change the expedition doing it with a partner? Now, I know you are married, so I don't know if does that give you... how does it work with a partner? Like, is it just constant compromise, or are you just very good now at traveling together? Or what happens when you get in a mood with each other? Or maybe you're thinking, I don't want to see his back again. I'm sick of watching his back, or he's going too slow, he's going too fast for me. How do you manage the sort of the partnership side of things?
Yeah, it's a difficult one, that. I mean, if we got in a mood with each other, we would just scoot separately for a bit, just to get a bit of space. And, there were definitely like arguments along the way, and just like getting fed up of each other. But generally, we work quite well on an expedition. And I think that's really important if you're going to go away with someone for that length of time, that you've got to be pretty solid, being in each other's pockets so much. But we actually met while traveling. And so in a way, being with each other 24/7 in that kind of constant changing situation is like our norm. And then it's most unusual when we're back in the UK in our regular jobs.
What was it like finishing for you?
the day we finished, it was just relief, to be honest, that feeling of just ready for it to be over. And I was just so tired. And so we queued up and we crossed the border to go into Mexico. And went and had something to eat and drink, and it was a bit flat actually. And then after that, we just kind of went back to our accommodation and had an early night. There was no kind of celebration, but I very rarely on expeditions actually get that feeling of when you're finishing and it's like amazing and this big moment. And quite often it just feels a bit strange or weird or a bit flat.
Especially, I think, when it's been, part of your focus for so long. Yes, this is what we're going to be doing. We're going to be doing this in May 2018. We're going to be kicking the States. We're going to, sharing the journey. You've got 3 months, and that's your focus. And then suddenly it's like, oh, it's over. It's done. It's dusted. What happened after that?
So afterwards, we had a few weeks just in the States, and we got the train back up to Vancouver. And then, oh God, I can't even remember now. I literally can't remember what we did after. I remember now. So afterwards we came back to the UK and I went straight into, work with Love Her Wild and getting back into the swing of things, and had an expedition pretty quickly afterwards. And it was, it's always really strange after a trip, especially something that big. And it's very like up and down. Like I'd go from feeling amazing and really elated and excited about the thing we'd just done to just feeling really like sad and miserable about it all.
Yeah. So your next exhibition actually happened pretty soon after that, wasn't it? Was this the big hike in the desert?
Yeah. So I had 2 shortly afterwards. One was both of them Love Her Wild trips. One was climbing Stock Kangri in India, and then the other one was leading a hike in Israel in the Negev desert, which was amazing because that's where all my adventuring kind of began, really.
Ooh, let's talk about the hike in Israel. Talk us through what it was, who you were doing it with, how it came about.
So that was with a group. I think there was 6 women. And that was a Love Her Wild trip. And I just had this idea that I really wanted to take a group of women to Israel to hike in the desert. And obviously one of the first adventures I'd ever done was hiking the length of Israel, and the desert is so beautiful there, and you just never see foreigners hiking there. It's this really little known trail, the Israel National Trail it's called. So I was like, I'm gonna take a group there and I'm gonna lead a group of women in the desert. And it was an amazing trip. It was a week in length, and we spent 4 days in the desert, but we also had time either side to visit Tel Aviv and Jerusalem. And it was also really nice because my husband's Israeli, and so all my in-laws are Israeli, and Israel is like this big part of my life, and I know so much about it. So it was kind of nice for me to be able to share that with other people. And obviously everyone just knows it as a place of conflict and war and violence and things, but there's so much more there than just that.
Because we're sort of starting to talk more about some of the Love Her Wild expeditions and challenges and trips that you've led and organised, let's just, for people who are new, who are listening, who maybe haven't heard about Love Her Wild, do you just want to tell everybody a little bit more about it?
Yeah, so Love Her Wild kind of came about because when I first started getting into the outdoors and adventure, I noticed that obviously it's very male dominant, but I experienced like a lot bad sexism. I actually joined a mountain leader course, and the guys on there were just really quite horrible to me. And at the time, I didn't really think much about it. But then when I went away and did this hike in Israel, I kind of realized, because along the way, I think we only met one woman the entire 2 months who was a hiker. It was just always guys, and I was really missing that female company. And I kind of realized afterwards that my experience just wasn't okay. And the adventure world is just so competitive and judgy, and it's everything I hate. I hate competition. It really just takes the fun out of it for me. So when I came back, I decided to launch this community for women to just connect with other like-minded women And then just kind of rocketed. It's crazy. Like the first thing I did was put a call out to see if any women would like to join me on what I call the Everest adventure. And I came up with this adventure idea that we would try and hike the height of Everest over 5 days in the Lake District. And I put this call out online, opened a Love Her Wild group. And then within a few weeks, I had almost 1,000 women in the group, and over 100 women applied to join this expedition. So I had this really tough job to kind of narrow it down to a small team. And that kind of launched the community, and it made me realize that there's a real gap for all female expeditions, and that there's so many other women out there who do just want to enjoy the outdoors without it needing to be this competitive thing where we're competing with each other, but we're just there to be supportive in a team and just having a good time.
It's been amazing to watch what has happened with Love Her Wild over the past sort of 2 years, I'd say. It has gone from strength to strength to strength, which is just so amazing to see, because you are such an incredibly supportive community, and it's so encouraging for other women who maybe are a little bit apprehensive, or maybe they've also been through similar experiences, similar to you, where they've gone on courses and it hasn't been particularly nice, hasn't been particularly supportive, and maybe sort of it's been a little bit toxic. And actually sometimes you just want to be amongst other women who understand you, who have this, a similar mindset, who can relate to what you're going through. So to tell us more about some of the other sort of expeditions that you've done with Love Her Wild. I know that there's lots to choose from, so maybe just pick a few which you've really sort of stood out. And I know that's really difficult to do.
Yeah, that is really difficult, because every single one is just and it's like having to pick between your children. Everyone is so special, and really, I've just met the most phenomenal women. I don't know what it is. Maybe I'm just a bit biased, but the women that come on Love Her Wild are just incredible, and so many of them are now like good friends, and I stay in touch. But I think the trips that I especially enjoy doing are the ones that have a conservation focus. So I'm really conscious that with Love Her Wild that we protect the planet, and we do our bit to try and be as eco as possible. And so I've organised a few expeditions that have involved like a conservation element, and they always feel quite special, because I think there's something really satisfying about being able to give back to nature when you're spending time in it as well. So the most recent one was in Tanzania, and it was a 10-day whale shark conservation trip, and that was pretty amazing.
Tell us more about the whale shark trip. It sounds incredible.
Do you know what? It was so amazing. Like that trip, I was really proud when that finished, actually, because it was on Mafia Island, which one of my favorite places, and not many people have heard of Mafia Island, but it's a small island of Tanzania, and they get this migration of whale sharks each year. And our team was swimming with the whale sharks each day and collecting data on them, because they're an endangered species, and collecting data allows research and conservation efforts to try and protect them. And then alongside that, we had yoga and personal development sessions, but we also had lots of conversations about the conservation and what we can do to protect the planet. And it was just so inspiring, like the energy amongst the women and their ambitions. And I really saw them just being away from their normal lives, doing something like mind-blowing, like swimming with whale sharks, and they're massive, like 10 meters massive, and doing something like that every day. It just like opens your mind, and you suddenly feel like, do you know what, I could be doing more of my life. And since coming back, it's been amazing hearing everything that they've done since they've come back, like from setting up conservation projects at work to signing up to volunteering and running their own trips, all sorts of stuff.
Yeah, absolutely fantastic. And you've also done a collaboration with two other guests that we've had on the Tough Girl podcast. We've spoken with Cal Major before, and we've also spoken with Molly Hughes. Now, you got together with the two of them to go on an adventure. Do you want to tell everybody a little bit more about that adventure?
Yeah, so do you know what? I had this idea when I was in Israel. The first time I was hiking across the desert, and you got to the Dead Sea, and you could just see on the other side of the Dead Sea the Jordanian mountains, and they were just so tempting. And I just remember this day where I was like sat having a lunch break, looking at the mountains, and I was like, I have to go to Jordan. It was really strange. I never like had that pull to go somewhere. And then, yeah, it was just, I think it was a year later, or maybe a year and a half later, just decided to make it happen. So I'd met Cal and Molly once at an event before and dropped them a message and was like, listen, I got this crazy idea to hike across the Jordan desert. And they were both mad enough just to say yes.
How was that experience?
Oh, do you know what? Jordan is beautiful. Do you know, it wasn't without its problems. So one thing that really frustrated me was the Bedouins there are lovely, but it was just like mind-boggling to them that there were 3 women alone in the desert, and they would split, like they would sometimes find it hilarious, and then the next second they would be like overprotective about it, and they would kind of flip between these two, like laughing in our faces to kind of basically stalking us with binoculars to make sure we don't get lost. And the trip was all about like, you know, empowering women and being in the Middle East and being 3 women alone is a big message in itself. So it was really frustrating, like having to ask them all the time just to leave us alone. And then we also had problems with we arranged for a guy to drop water, and basically he halfway through the desert decided he didn't want to help us anymore, so left us in the desert without water. So it wasn't without its problems, that expedition, and that was probably one of the toughest ones I've done, kind of mentally keeping on top of like all the struggles of the expedition. And also that was the first ever sponsored trip I've done, and I would say I made a lot of mistakes with working with brands, and it's definitely a lesson learned that I felt like I compromised what I stand for at some points on that trip. Well, I don't like putting out images that are too glossy and kind of glamorized adventure, and that's kind of the images that came out of that expedition, and I don't think they really represented like the reality that we were going through.
It is interesting. It is always going to be this journey, this learning curve. And you talked about some of the problems then. How did you handle those problems? I mean, what do you do when you are in the middle of the desert and the person that you've probably paid to drop water off at this certain point hasn't turned up, hasn't fulfilled their obligation, and yet, you know, you're still in the desert, you still haven't got water? I mean, how do you handle that? And especially being with 2 other women who you've only met once, so you may not have been in sort of, you know, a high stress situation before, then actually, how did you handle that?
So with like the practical problems, I actually handle those normally quite well, because I kind of like looking for solutions, and there is always a solution. So with that, it was just a case of finding a signal and then calling people who could help and get us water. So those kind of, you know, practical problems I actually quite like, and I find they're a distraction because it was hot and, you know, my legs were achy and things like that. So it gave me like some kind of satisfaction to be like, okay, we've got this problem, let's respond, let's solve it. But, you know, the mental and psychological drains, they're the ones I struggle with the most. And, you know, it can get really tiring when you're battling things and, you know, you've got like challenges going on mentally. It's hard. And I think I don't really know how I deal with it. I cry. Normally is like the first default. And then one thing I do is if I'm really tired and I'm just fed up and I've had enough, is I cry and then I eat all my snacks in one go, even though I regret it the next day, and I tuck myself into bed or I light a fire and I get my book out. I do whatever I need to do to feel a little bit comforted, and that kind of self-care, I think it's like giving yourself a hug. Yeah. I think that helps through.
And you know what? It's okay. It's okay to cry. It's okay to eat snacks. Like, if you're crying, it's releasing emotion, and sometimes you need to do that before you can properly think again. And actually, sometimes the best thing to do in a challenging situation is to either just sit down, take a few deep breaths, eat some food, give your brain some food power before, you know, making the next decision. Because you never want to do anything when you're stressed, tired and hungry or thirsty.
Yeah. Bad station.
I don't know if you can do this, but can you just run through either where you've been in the different countries that you've sort of traveled to, worked in? Now, I don't know, is that easy for you to do off the top of your head?
What, all of them?
Yeah.
Oh gosh, that's impossible. Oh God, I can't even remember where I was last week, Sarah.
Because I mean, even just looking at it, because there's been Israel, there's been India, there's been Canada, there's been America, there's been Mexico, there's been
Norway was an amazing one. Yeah, and I've done lots in the UK as well, actually. Yeah. And the more I travel, the more I'm starting to appreciate the UK and how amazing it is and how much beauty we have on our doorstep.
So let's just go back then to initially what you said at the beginning. So you've been a nomadic, you've been traveling for the last sort of 3 years, constantly on the move, doing lots of expeditions, lots of challenges, and sometimes I'm following along on social media. I'm like, hold on, where is she now? What's she doing? Oh my goodness! Like I'm exhausted for you, for what you've been doing. But you have recently made sort of a new decision. You've moved over to Bristol. You're getting a permanent place. So take us back to how this developed and why you've made the decision and how it's come about.
When I decided that I wanted to make a go of Love Her Wild and also to build my blog a bit more and to hopefully make a career out of this, like a big factor in making that possible was keeping monthly expenses as low as possible. So my husband's the same, which is an important thing to mention, that he's also working for himself online. And it only worked because we were both agreeing, let's try and make this happen. And the easiest way to keep our expenses down was to travel because, we spent quite a lot of time in Tanzania, for example, and we could rent out very basic house, a basic room in a house. And it was, I can't remember, maybe like $60 a month to rent that out. So very, very cheap. And so that was a big deciding factor for going nomadic, as well as just the excitement of it and having that opportunity. And, we don't have children yet and we don't have a house or a mortgage and things like that. So we really wanted to make the most of that opportunity. And it's been incredible. And yeah, we've just been really fortunate with the places we've been and the things we've been able to see. But it's really tiring. And especially if you're running your own business or you're doing your own thing, when you're away, and especially if you're doing it the way we were, which is trying to keep costs down, it means you often remove those comforts that you get at home. And what I found was I'd be working really unhealthy hours and I'd be working really late into the night and I'd find it really hard to switch off from work. It's just the small things like not having friends nearby, and for me, not being able to go to the cinema once in a while to switch off and things like that I really enjoy doing. So towards the end, it just stopped being fun. And I really felt like a holiday was being in the UK and having my own kitchen that I can cook in and foods that were familiar, and grabbing a coffee with a friend. Like that felt like more of a holiday than going to India. So it felt like it was time for a change. And so the move to Bristol was an attempt just to slow down and have a bit more stability. And I think it's just going to make for a much healthier work-life balance. And I also think it'll make me a lot more productive with my work.
No, I think it's really interesting what you said there. It stopped being fun, and actually, your holiday was probably going back to the routine that everyone else has. Having being able to make your own cup of tea in the kitchen, being able to do your own laundry, being close to friends, being able to go to the cinema, have a few little luxuries. Yeah.
This is something, again, that's often not in the adventure world, that, normal, in brackets, like normal living is like a negative thing, and that, the right way or the right thing to strive for is being nomadic and being, traveling full time. And while it's amazing, it's just not all it's cut out to be. And I think ultimately, friends and family are like the biggest thing, and that's something you have to compromise when you're on the move all the time. And I think it's great to have roots somewhere and to know the place you're in and to have good friends nearby in a community. I think those are really incredible things.
And no matter what you're doing, whether you are traveling or whether you're at home, that at some point it does become more of a routine. So whether you're traveling to new places every day, same thing, on the bike for me, and kick scooting as well. You get up, you do your cycling. Yes, you're seeing new places, and yes, it's amazing. But sometimes it's not, and that can actually be. I think that can be challenging when other people are living through you, and then suddenly you have a bad day or not so great a day, and then you feel guilty for not appreciating where you are, and you're thinking, hold on, I'm in another country, I'm cycling or kick scooting, I'm on this expedition, I'm on this challenge, I'm living this amazing life, and yet actually it's, I'm not finding it fun, or I'm not happy, and you start to think, hold on, what's wrong with me? And there's yeah. But there's nothing wrong at all. It's just actually sometimes, it needs a bit of change. So you're currently in Bristol, which is fantastic. And tell everybody how because we were having a little chat about this before, because I wanted to know how you made your decision of why you picked Bristol for it to be your base for a while.
So it was pretty quick, the decision. I mean, one thing is when you're on the move non-stop for 3 years, decision making becomes like a very quick thing, because if you spent any time on making a decision, you would just never get anywhere, because you got to almost make decisions every day. Do we stay? Do we go? Should we do this? Should we do that? So we just got used to making really quick decisions. And I think the idea came actually, I'm pretty sure it was a girl called Lauren who I met through Love Her Wild, and I was at the Women Adventure Expo in Bristol last October, and mentioned that I was thinking, we're thinking of settling down and finding a place in the UK for a little bit. And she was like, oh, you should come to Bristol. So I thought, why not? It's cheaper than London. We were in London before, and London's very expensive. And, a lot of our friends there have moved on. They're now traveling and doing their own things. And it seems quite exciting having a new city to explore.
So what are your plans for the rest of 2019?
So the rest of the year is I've got big plans of Love Her Wild. It's really exciting because Shauna Fallon has been Love Her Wild ambassador pretty much since day one. And she is officially coming on board as a community manager, which I'm so excited about, because I've been running Love Her Wild on my own since the beginning, and I'm going a bit mad with it because it's such hard work. And quite often I feel like the emails and the admin and all the legalities of it takes up so much time that I don't have any time left over to be creative. So she's coming on board, and her role is just to be like, how can we better serve the community? How can we get more women out adventuring? So that's a big thing with Love Her Wild. And then I've got a couple more big trips and expeditions. I'm leading one in Japan in September, which I'm really looking forward to. And then on the blogging side, I've also got a little bit of traveling planned. The big thing that I'm really excited about doing this year is heading to Tonga, which is after leading the Japan expedition, and hopefully swimming with humpback whales, because I'm really excited about the ocean and ocean conservation. And that's just reminded me, I'm working on another project on ocean conservation, which should be launched pretty soon, which is another exciting thing that I'm busy with.
Oh, this is so awesome. I'm so excited and so happy for you. This is absolutely amazing. Now, where can people find out more information about you, about Love Her Wild, and how can they get involved in the Love Her Wild community?
The best place to head is the loveherwild.com website. And on there you can find, there's a little bit of blurb about me, and there's a link there to my blog if you're interested in reading more about kicking the States. And on there I love just blogging really honestly. So if you're interested in how I make a living, or even how much I earn, I even put like my income reports up on there. I try and put everything on my website to try and be an open book. Because I remember when I was starting out in this, it was something that really frustrated me was, people would say they're a professional adventurer, and I'm like, how do you actually do it? So yeah, and also on the Love Her Wild website, there's a link there to the private Facebook group, which is a great group to join, where you can meet the other women and see what sort of adventures they're going on. And you can also see what expeditions we got coming up this year if you want to join any.
Fantastic. And I just actually want to second going to visit the Ordinary Adventure, because Bex is so open and so honest, because that's the question that everyone wants to know is, how do you afford to do this? Where do you make your money? And Bex talks about the money, talks about the travel, talks about adventure grants, talks about scholarships, talks about the challenges that she's faced. So, her most recent one is, why I'm quitting, being a digital nomad. So there's really open and honest blog posts on there, especially, one of them about adventure and privilege, which I particularly enjoyed reading. So definitely well worth reading, because I think sometimes what you say is so open and honest that sometimes people don't necessarily want to hear it. And it can be
let's not get on adventure and privilege, because I definitely wound a few people up about that. But I really felt like that needed to be said in the adventure scene. I was getting so fed up of people making out like anyone can do this, and that is just turning a blind eye to the extreme poverty that 98% of the planet is living in. So it really frustrated me. I think it's good to stir a few feathers once in a while.
No, absolutely, and it's amazing what you're doing, and equally we love our wild. It's such an incredibly supportive community. So go and find your wild. I'll make sure that I put all of the links to Love Her Wild and The Ordinary Adventurer, so you can go and follow on Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, and all that good stuff. But Bex, finally for you, or finally for our listeners, final advice and tips. I was going to say, how do you find your wild? But advice and tips for other women out there who do want to find their own wild. They want to go on adventures. They want to do challenge. They want to step outside their comfort zone. What advice and tips do you have for them?
So for me, it's just all about finding inner confidence and a bit of self-belief so that you can put yourself out there, because it's just such a scary thing, especially when you're starting out in adventure. But I would just find things that excite you. I think that's so important. Forget what everyone else is doing and just try and find the things that really get you going, that you're interested in, and really try and connect to other people, but find those supportive groups. The Tough Girl Tribe is amazing, and Love Her Wild, and there's all these groups out there that are just meant to be safe spaces where if you're stuck on anything, you have any questions, you can just ask freely.
Bex, thank you so much for coming back on the Tough Girl podcast to share more of your incredible story, your incredible journey. It's amazing to see where the journey that you've been on, and you can obviously go back and listen to when we first spoke with Bex back in 2017 to see how she initially started, and then you'll be able to sort of see the progress and the steps that she's taken to get to where she is currently now. Massive thank you, Bex.
Thank you.
So Tribe, I am super excited that myself and Bex, we are collaborating on an awesome weekend in London. It's called Build Your Brand. It's taking place on Saturday the 6th of April on Sunday the 7th of April. So I'm going to get Bex to tell you a little bit more about what we're doing, and then we'll just tell you a little bit more about the plans for the weekend, about building the brand. So Bex, tell us a little bit more about what we're doing.
Both of us will be leading a workshop that is basically designed for anyone that's got any ambitions with building a brand. And that can be anything from a blog, a podcast, if you've got a product or a service that you want to push, if you've got a charity idea, whatever it is, if you've got a product and some ambitions of where to take it, we are basically planning to have a weekend where we are just really honest about everything from growing an audience on social media, connecting with companies, how we grow our Patreon pages, absolutely everything. And I think what's amazing about both our stories is that we grew pretty quickly, and really just using the power of social media and an online presence. And I'm just really excited to be able to share that, because it's something I'm just really infused about. And, it's been completely life-changing for me, being able to build something that I'm passionate about, that allows me to work for myself and with complete flexibility, and to be able to inspire other women in adventure. That really is my dream. And all that's just become possible because I built that brand and because I learned how to use social media and blogging and tools like that.
And I think it's both fair to say as well, we've both made mistakes along the way and faced like, you know, difficult challenges, or things haven't gone to plan, or we've had certain failures. And so actually being able to look back and reflect on them and be like, actually, don't do this. This is what you need to do, or this is what I would have done when I started out. I mean, Bex, you know, who founded Love Her Wild, you know, community's over 5,000 people. You know, you do regularly deliver amazing talks all over the world. I mean, you've got all these sellout expeditions. You were also on the 2018 San Miguel Rich List, which is incredible. And so Bex has got sort of what I would say is it's like the blogging side of things. She's getting like 10,000 visitors a month for a blog. So she'll be focusing more on the blogging, and for me, I'll be focusing more on the podcasting side of things, building a podcast. So the Tough Girl podcast has now had over 700,000 downloads, and it won the Women's Sports Trust Media Initiative of the Year award, beating companies like Sky Sports, the BBC, Manchester City. I'm actually super looking forward to. I think it's going to be really, really interesting. We've got 2 days. I'm not going to lie, they're going to be jam-packed full.
Our schedule pretty full.
Yeah, we were chatting the other day, and it was like, oh, we're going to cover this as well. Yep, and this and this and this, and it's like, yeah. So it's not it. It's going to be hard work, but it's going to be super fun, and you are going to learn so much information. But it's not just going to be us talking. It's going to be, you know, it's going to be interactive. You're going to be doing a lot of personal work yourself on learning about, you know, your brand, what your mission is, what it is that you're wanting to do. And it's all going to end up linking together. There's going to be lots of time for questions and answers, the opportunity for you to share your own projects with the group of people, and, you know, obviously to network with the other attendees.
And actually, it's something I've really learned in this process is the power of connecting with other people who are like, you know, driven, and they've got an idea, and those networks and collaborations have been massive. You know, Love Her Wild, from the beginning, we've been really supportive of each other and learning from each other, and that's massive. And I think that's going to be something that's going to be quite incredible with the weekend, is just everyone being able to connect with other people and seeing what collaborations come out of it.
Yeah, 100%. But it will leave you feeling inspired and equipped to start making, you know, the changes that you want to see, and to take the first steps in your business and growing your own successful brand. So the price is £200. It's Saturday the 6th and 7th of April. It's at Goldsmith University in London. It's going to be from 10 till 5 on the Saturday and Sunday. But if you are listening to this podcast now and you decide to book, there will be a 10% discount available for you. You just have to mention when you book. And if you go to loveherwild.com/build your brand workshop, you can find how to book there. You can basically send an email to Bex. Bex, what's your email address?
So it's bex@loveherwild.com.
Fantastic. So 10% discount off the price. That is Saturday 6th and Sunday the 7th of April. Any final words or anything else we should say about the brand workshop? Anything else that we maybe haven't covered?
So there's only a few spaces left. So there's only a couple of spaces left. So just get in there quick. Yeah, I'm just really excited about it. And it's something I'm just so passionate about, being able to share everything I've learned along the way.
Yeah, it's going to be absolutely awesome. Okay, so hopefully we will see you there.